Hey everybody, welcome back to the Captain's Coffee. I'm David, and today we're going to be sharing our beginner's guide to pour over coffee using the super easy to use bee house dripper. Look, there's a lot of videos out there on pour overs and recipes and advanced techniques, but if you're new to pour over brewing, it can seem kind of intimidating. There's a lot of new words and terminology, advanced concepts, and we want to demystify it, break it down, make it simple and easy to understand for you today. And we're going to do that in 3 parts. We're going to go over the basic concepts, words you need to know, equipment you're going to need, and then in the second part, we're going to talk about why the bee house dripper is our favorite for introducing people to pour over brewing. And then finally, we're going to leave you with a recipe, a template that you can use to get started right away, and then build on as you get more and more comfortable with pour over brewing. So real quick, if you'd like to help support us in making videos like this, you can visit our store at thecaptainscoffee.com. There's a link to that in the description below. We sell brewers, roasted coffee, green coffee for home roasters. You can also just leave us a like. It's a free way to support us, and it helps us out a lot. With that out of the way, let's get into it. This part of the video is going to be pretty dense. We're going to go over a lot of concepts that may be new to you, some new terms you might not have heard before, but I promise that by the end, we're going to leave you with some really simple ideas and get you started with pour overs from a beginner standpoint. You can always review this section of the video when you're ready to dive in a little deeper, and we'll leave a transcript of this part up on our website. There'll be a link to that in the description below. So first, let's clear something up. Pour over brewing and manual brewing are the same thing. I'm sure you're familiar with automatic drip brewing, which is just, a normal Mr. Coffee type coffee maker you might have at home. So in this case, the difference is you are the coffee maker, making it a manual drip brewer. And lots of people call that pour over brewing. Okay, now let's go over the equipment you're gonna need. First, and most importantly, you're gonna need coffee. Next, you're gonna need hot water. You can use a gooseneck kettle like this one. You can use any old tea kettle you might have sitting around the house. If you really want to get fancy, we like to use one with a temperature control on it, so you can really control that variable while you're brewing. But any old tea kettle will work. It's just got to be the right temperature. Next, you're going to need a grinder. You can use a manual grinder or, of course, the electric. Either will work. In this case, you just want to make sure you've got control over the size of the grounds. Also, it's very helpful to have a timer. You can use a kitchen timer, you can use the stopwatch on your phone. Either will work just fine. Next, you're going to need filters. Now, optionally, we think it's helpful to have a scale. If you're already roasting coffee at home, you probably have one of these anyway. But it just makes the process so much more repeatable than just using a scoop. But if a scoop is all you have, it'll work just fine. Finally, you're gonna need a mug or a decanter to brew your coffee into. And that's it. That's all you should need for now. Next, we're gonna talk about water temperature. This one's pretty straightforward. The gold standard for water temperature for brewing coffee is 195 degrees to 205 degrees Fahrenheit. Hotter water tends to bring out more brightness, sweetness in your coffee, while cooler water tends to bring out more body and mouthfeel. So we recommend if you're gonna brew something like a natural process coffee, you might wanna go something like 203 to 205 degrees. And if you're gonna stick to a wash coffee, we recommend keeping it a little cooler around 198 to 202 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we're gonna talk about how much coffee you should use while brewing. Once again, this one's pretty straightforward. The gold standard for brewing is a coffee to water ratio of 1 to 15 to 1 to 17. It's a good idea to stay in that range. For stronger brews, you'd want to brew 1 to 15. For weaker, or if you just like your coffee a little less strong, 1 to 17 is great. We prefer right at 1 to 16. So the best way to find out how much coffee you need is to decide how much you want brewed in total. So if you want 300 grams or around 10 ounces of total coffee, divide that 300 by 16, and you need 19 grams of coffee. Pretty straightforward. Next, we're going to talk about the big steps during the pour over process. And the first one is called the bloom. The bloom is when you add your initial dose of hot water to your freshly ground coffee. The bloom is really important because it helps to release leftover CO2, carbon dioxide, from the roasting process. If we dissolve CO2 in coffee, it tends to leave it with a very sour taste. You don't want that. There's a few different schools of thought when it comes to how to manage the bloom. Some folks believe the best thing to do is the simplest. Pour your hot water directly over the grounds as evenly as possible and allow the gases and gravity to do the work for you. Other people think it's absolutely necessary to stir the bloom in order to fully saturate all the grounds for an even extraction. Yet another group of people thinks there's a middle ground where you swirl the bloom, which can help to cover all the grounds for an even extraction without agitating it too much. We think it's best to do whatever is simple, repeatable, and consistent, especially early on when you're first learning about how to do pour-overs. That's why we'd recommend the simplest method. Just pour your hot water as evenly as possible and let the gravity and the gases do the work for you. Once you feel a little more comfortable with pour-overs, feel free to experiment, try the other methods, see what works best for you. A final note about the bloom. Lots of people ask, how much water should I be using during this portion of the pour-over? Well, a good rule of thumb is to use twice as much water as you used coffee. So if you used 20 grams of coffee, add 40 grams or so of water during the bloom. Next, let's talk about how you pour your water. Wait, let's back up. We should first talk about what you pour your water with. Ideally, you'd want to use a gooseneck kettle like this. The long, thin spout allows you to easily control how quickly or how slowly the water comes out, as well as giving you more control about the direction so you can evenly saturate your grounds. But the Bee House is such a forgiving brewer that you can use any old tea kettle that you might have lying around. So, moving on. As with the bloom, there's a few different schools of thought about how you should pour your water once the bloom is finished. The first and simplest is what we'll call the all-at-once school of thought, which says it's perfectly fine to fill your pour-over all the way to the top as many times as necessary, usually 1 or 2 times, in order to get the desired brew volume you're looking for. Next, there's the pulse pour group. It believes in these small, measured doses that happen several times, usually 3 or 4 times, throughout the pour-over in order to very scientifically choose when and how to extract the coffee. For example, you might pour in 40% of your brew water right at the beginning after the bloom, wait 30 seconds, pour in 30% more of your water, wait 30 more seconds, and then finally add your remaining water to the exact brew amount required. There's yet another group that believes in the bypass method, which is to say you dilute the coffee first by adding hot water straight to your cup and then brewing over that hot water, usually in very concentrated pulse pours. Here again, all of these methods have their virtues, but we think for beginners, especially when you're using a pour-over as forgiving as the Bee House dripper, it's perfectly fine to just pour all at once until you reach your desired brew volume. The Bee House controls the brewing for you by having small holes that control the drip, so you don't need to worry nearly as much about pulse pouring in order to control the flow. The other methods discussed here really work better with pour-overs with very large holes at the bottom, like the Hario V60, but we'll save that one for a more advanced pour-over guide. Once you've added all your water, we enter what's known as the drawdown phase of the pour-over, when the last of the water drips all the way through your coffee and into your mug. During the early part of the drawdown phase, we find it's really helpful to give the coffee a few gentle swirls. This technique was made famous by coffee expert Scott Rao and is often called the Rao spin. You'll know you did it right when the drawdown is finished and you see a nice, fairly level bed of coffee at the bottom, as well as very few big grounds stuck to the side of the filter. Finally, the brew time is the last variable we'll discuss in pour-over brewing. You don't want it to be too slow, or you'll over-extract your coffee, giving you bitter and astringent notes. You don't want it to be too fast, or your coffee will be under-extracted, leaving it kind of sour and flat. A good brew time with the Bee House should land somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 total minutes, depending on your brew volume. Faster brews are generally sweeter, cleaner, a little brighter. Slower brews tend to have more body and a little more mouthfeel. With the Bee House controlling the flow of the brew for you, the way you adjust the brew time is by making your grind more coarse or more fine. Start with a medium grind and see if your brew time lands somewhere inside of that range. If it's a little fast, adjust your grind more fine until it starts to taste bitter and astringent. There, just dial back a little more coarse, and you found your perfect grind. Next, I want to talk a little bit about why we always recommend the Bee House Dripper for anyone who's just getting into pour-overs for the first time. There's several reasons why we think it's the simplest and easiest to use pour-over. One of the things we like best about the Bee House Dripper is that the filters are available just about anywhere at nearly every grocery store. These number 4 Melita filters work great, and they're wonderful for larger brews if you're going to brew for 2 or 3 people, and the number 2 filters are great if you only need to brew 1 cup at a time. Another thing we really like about the Bee House Dripper is it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the actual pouring process of the brew. It's got 2 small holes on the bottom, which help to regulate the pour and makes it much easier and simpler for you when you're adding the water. Unlike the Hario V60, which has 1 very large hole, meaning you have to control the flow rate yourself. Finally, as a bonus, it's a really nice looking brewer. It's made out of durable, machine washable, Japanese ceramic, comes in a wide variety of colors, and it just looks really great as a part of your coffee brewing collection. So here's our go-to simplified, easy recipe for brewing with the Bee House Dripper. You can use it moving forward as a template, you can modify it as you begin mastering pour-over techniques, and you can use it to make your perfect cup for you.
Today we're going to be making 16 ounces, or about 475 grams of finished brew, which is a great amount for sharing with 2 people. If you'd like to make a single cup, just divide all our numbers by half. We're using a coffee to water ratio of 1:16, so after accounting for water trapped in the grounds during brewing, we'll need 17 ounces or 500 grams of hot water. Don't worry if you don't have a scale, we'll include approximate measurements with common kitchen items. First, we're going to need 32 grams of coffee, ground medium and slightly fine. If we put up a scale of 1 through 10, with very fine being 1 and very coarse being 10, we're shooting for about a 4.5. Next, we're going to heat our water to 204 degrees Fahrenheit, or just off the boil, since we're brewing a natural coffee. The one we're using today is a delicious coffee we recently got from Burundi. While the water's heating, fold the edges of a number 4 Melita filter like so. Place it inside the Bee House Dripper on top of your mug or decanter. Next, remember to fully rinse the filter, removing any papery flavor and pre-warming your mug or decanter. Always be sure to discard the water you used for rinsing. Now, add the coffee to your Bee House and gently shake to level the coffee bed. Zero your scale, grab your hot water, and get ready to start your timer. Now begin the bloom by pouring 65 grams of hot water, or about twice as much water as coffee, in a circle starting in the middle of the coffee bed and moving outward to fully soak all the grounds. After 30 seconds of bloom, gently add more hot water until you reach 250 grams of total water. If you don't have a scale, simply fill the Bee House Dripper all the way full with water. Pour in circles to keep from creating channels in the coffee bed, ensuring even extraction. Once your water is drained a bit, give the pour-over a gentle swirl to help level the coffee bed again. Once the coffee is drained enough so that you can see the coffee bed, add the remaining 250 grams of water, once again pouring in gentle circles. If you don't have a scale, simply refill the dripper all the way full. As before, once a bit of the water is drained, gently swirl again. Now just wait for the drawdown. If your grind was in the ballpark, you should finish drawing down at around 3 minutes and 30 seconds for a brew this large. You'll know that you poured and swirled correctly if you can see a nice even coffee bed at the bottom. Now that the drawdown has completed, set aside your bee house stripper. If you brewed your pour over into a decanter, all that's left to do is pour your coffee into a mug and enjoy.
So if you've never done pour over brewing before, I really hope this video gives you the confidence to give it a try. It's so much fun. You're gonna love it, I guarantee. Leave us a like if you did enjoy this video, if you learned something new. Subscribe for more coffee guide videos. And visit us at thecaptainscoffee.com for all your roasting and brewing needs. And yeah, if you have been brewing pour over for a while, leave us your favorite recipe in the comment below. We'd love to try it. And as always, thanks for joining us and happy brewing.